The moment this story cracked open, it wasn't just another royal rumor, it felt like a controlled explosion right inside the palace walls. The kind that doesn't just shake headlines but rattles loyalties, exposes secrets, and leaves everyone wondering who knew what and when. Because how does someone like Sarah Ferguson, a woman who has literally lived inside the machinery of royal life, get completely shut out by publishers, unless the story she's carrying is so volatile that even touching it feels dangerous?
Fergie is preparing to go nuclear, to drop the bomb that for a long time she has resisted.
Harry and Meghan are incredibly nervous about the possibility of a tell-all memoir from Sarah Ferguson.
And here is Meghan Markle posting on her Instagram, going to the island. That's Little St. James. And by the way, this plane, PJWIT, was flying to Little St. James, especially on that date that she posted this story.
And that's where the silence starts to feel louder than the rejection itself. Think about it. Not just a no, not just hesitation. Total shutdown. Doors closed, calls unanswered, meetings denied. For someone sitting on decades of insider knowledge, that's not normal, it's suspicious. Because publishers don't walk away from scandal, they chase it. Unless the scandal risks turning into something uncontrollable. Something that doesn't just sell books, but rewrites narratives. So the real question isn't why Ferguson was rejected. It's what she was offering that made everyone step back at once. And here's where things take a sharp turn. Because while the spotlight initially lands on Ferguson, the shockwave doesn't stop there. It redirects, it shifts. It lands somewhere unexpected, and suddenly Meghan Markle is right in the center of it.
She knows the way for the big payday is a Prince Harry style autobiography. A $20 million advance, like Harry received, is what she wants.
Because rejection doesn't kill a story like this. It mutates it. It frees it. It removes structure, control, and careful packaging, and what you're left with is something far more unpredictable. A version that doesn't need approval. A version that doesn't play by publishing rules. And when someone with inside access feels cornered, overlooked, and financially pressured, the question becomes dangerously simple. What happens when they stop holding back? What happens when keeping quiet is no longer an option? That's when patterns start forming. That's when past actions suddenly look like blueprints. Because Ferguson isn't new to this. She's done it before. She's written, she's exposed, she's paid the price and survived, which means she already knows exactly how far she can go and what it costs. And now, with nothing tying her down, nothing protecting the institution, nothing shielding anyone from fallout, the game changes completely.
And the people who are most terrified about this are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, because it is Fergie, of course, who could reveal all about what really went on with this couple and the British royal family and Andrew behind the scenes.
That memoir, or a memoir of that scale, would of course revisit some of the most controversial moments in royal history, including the fallout from Megxit.
And suddenly, it's not about one rejected book anymore. It's about strategy, about timing, about building something bigger than a memoir, something layered. Interviews, streaming deals, media appearances, a narrative that unfolds piece by piece, each part feeding the next. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because it mirrors a path that's already been taken, watched closely, studied carefully, almost like someone has been observing, waiting, learning. But here's the detail most people overlook, the connection that quietly sits in the background, almost invisible until you start pulling the threads. Meghan Markle and Princess Eugenie, not just acquaintances, not just casual proximity, a bond, a real one, built during pressure, built during chaos, built when everything around Meghan was uncertain and overwhelming. And in those moments, people talk, they open up, they say things they don't repeat publicly, things they assume are safe, private, protected.
The press is completely ignoring us. The press does not want to touch the fact that Meghan was called as a witness by Virginia Roberts, who said that she was a close associate of Prince Andrew. And of course, it's not in anybody's best interest to have Meghan Markle testify, because they know that she knows a lot. And this is why this woman is flaunting her impunity around, or feels untouched.
And this is where the story tightens, because proximity matters, access matters. Eugenie wasn't just around, she was inside the environment, living in the same spaces. places, surrounded by the same details, witnessing the same tensions, and more importantly, listening to what was said behind closed doors, during vulnerable conversations, in moments where there were no cameras, no press statements, no carefully crafted narratives, just raw, unfiltered reality. And if those conversations traveled, if even fragments moved beyond their original space, then what exists now isn't just memory, it's leverage. Quiet, unseen leverage.
She needs the cash. She thinks it's already too late for her daughters because William is slowly marginalizing them.
That Meghan utilized Beatrice and Eugenie to get closer to Prince Harry. And I think that that's an element of the story that Harry and Meghan leave out.
Because information doesn't need to be written down to become powerful. It just needs to be remembered. And Ferguson, through Eugenie, doesn't need anonymous sources. She doesn't need speculation. She doesn't need secondhand whispers. She potentially has something far more dangerous, first-hand emotional truth. The kind that doesn't always match public storytelling. The kind that complicates narratives. And when you combine that with everything happening around her, financial pressure, isolation, being cut off from traditional royal structures, it creates a very specific kind of person. Someone with experience, someone with history, and most importantly, someone with nothing left to lose. And that phrase isn't dramatic, it's strategic. Because people with nothing left to lose don't calculate risk the same way. They don't pause the same way. They don't protect others the same way. They act. And when they act, they don't just shift the story, they destabilize it. And if that destabilization begins, it doesn't unfold gently, it fractures everything at once, quietly at first, then all at once, like cracks spreading beneath polished marble until the entire structure suddenly feels unsafe to stand on. Because once you accept the possibility that Ferguson isn't restrained by reputation, approval, or consequence anymore, the next question becomes unavoidable. What exactly could she reveal that hasn't already been said? And that's where the fear reportedly shifts from vague anxiety to very specific pressure points. Because this isn't about general gossip anymore, it's about contradictions, timelines, and details that don't quite align with the story the world has already been told. Because where the bodies are buried isn't just a dramatic phrase, it's a warning, and not the kind that gets thrown around lightly inside royal circles, especially not when legal action is already being considered before a single page has even been finalized. Think about that for a second. A potential lawsuit against a book that doesn't even exist yet. That's not overreaction, that's preemptive containment. That's an institution recognizing that whatever might come out could be impossible to control once it's public. And when control becomes uncertain, power starts to look fragile. And when power looks fragile, relationships begin to shift. Distances grow. Lines are drawn quietly, without announcement, without explanation, but with very clear intent. Because exclusion, being cut off from events, from appearances, from visibility, that's not random, that's pressure. That's leverage being applied in real time. But here's the dangerous flaw in that strategy. Leverage only works on people who still have something to lose. And what happens when that's no longer the case? When titles are already gone, reputations already damaged, financial stability already shaken, and public standing already diminished? What exactly is left to threaten? What exactly is left to protect? Because at that point, the rules change entirely. Silence is no longer valuable. Loyalty becomes optional. And truth, whatever version of it exists in memory, becomes currency. And that's where the story turns sharply toward specifics, toward the kind of details that don't just stir curiosity, but actively challenge what people think they already understand. Because this isn't about vague accusations floating in tabloids. This is about moments that have already been discussed publicly, but never fully resolved. Moments like the bridesmaid dress incident, where two completely different versions of events exist side by side, both widely believed depending on who you ask, but never definitively settled. And here's the tension. Eugenie was there, close enough to observe, close enough to hear, close enough to know which version aligns with reality. And if that version was ever shared privately, if it ever reached Ferguson, then suddenly this isn't speculation anymore, it's a competing account with proximity behind it. And proximity changes everything. Then there are the bullying allegations, another unresolved fracture point, officially denied but never publicly clarified, quietly investigated but never transparently concluded. A complaint exists, an inquiry happened, but the outcome? Hidden, sealed, left ambiguous. And ambiguity is dangerous because it leaves space for interpretation, for doubt, for alternative narratives to step in and fill the gaps. And if Ferguson has insight into what was seen, what was reported, or what was experienced during that time, then that silence could be replaced with something far more concrete, something that doesn't rely on leaked documents or unnamed insiders, but on direct recollection information passed through trusted relationships. And that kind of detail doesn't just add to the story, it reshapes it. Then there's the private communication layer, the part no one ever sees but everyone suspects exists. Messages, conversations, frustrations shared in confidence, the kind of unfiltered honesty that never makes it into interviews or documentaries. Because public narratives are always refined, always intentional, always structured. But private ones, they're messy, emotional, contradictory. And if those private moments were ever spoken aloud, ever repeated, ever remembered, then they exist somewhere, stored, unrecorded, but not forgotten. And Ferguson, positioned exactly where she is, might have access to that invisible archive. And then comes the timeline, the exit that reshaped everything. Because narratives depend on timing, on cause and effect, on the order in which events are presented. A reaction feels justified if it appears immediate, forced, unavoidable. But if it was planned earlier, if discussions were happening long before the public knew, then the entire emotional framing shifts. And that's not a small adjustment, that's a complete reframing of motive, of intent, of truth itself. Because what looks like escape can start to look like strategy. What feels like pressure can begin to feel like preparation. And if Ferguson can anchor that timeline differently, even slightly, the ripple effect could be massive. And just when it feels like the layers couldn't go deeper, another connection quietly surfaces. The Soho House network, the overlapping social circles, the introductions, the relationships that existed before everything became public. Not accusations, not conclusions, just connections, timelines, intersections that when viewed together create patterns. And patterns invite questions. Questions that don't need direct answers to feel unsettling. And all of this builds toward a single uncomfortable realization: the story that has been told so far might not be the only version that exists. And the moment another version emerges, especially from someone with proximity, experience, and nothing left to protect, the balance shifts. Because this isn't about proving one side right or wrong, it's about introducing doubt. And doubt, once planted, spreads quietly. It lingers. It reshapes perception over time. And Ferguson, whether intentionally or not, stands in a position where she could introduce that doubt in a way no outsider ever could. Not as a commentator, not as a journalist, but as someone who was there, connected, informed, and now completely unrestricted. And that's what makes this situation feel less like a rumor and more like a countdown. Because whether the memoir happens or not, whether it's published, streamed, or revealed in fragments, the pressure has already started building. The reactions are already happening. The distances are already forming. And the silence feels heavier than anything that's been said so far. Because silence in a situation like this isn't calm, it's anticipation. It's the space before something breaks. And the most unsettling part? No one seems entirely sure what that breaking point will reveal, or who it will affect the most when it finally does.